Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jake Martins. I'm the General Manager of Corporate Services. And given that Chair Cole Hamilton is joining us electronically today and Vice Chair Kerr is away, our procedure bylaw provides for the presiding member to be in attendance in person. So I'm basically here to support the process of selecting a presiding member for the meeting. So we've just gone through the process over the last couple of months of selecting chairs for the year. So this will not be an election by secret ballot. This will just be a selection by way of a resolution. So unless there's any questions, directors, I'd be pleased to accept a motion to appoint a presiding member for the meeting. And Director Arbor.
Thanks. I'll nominate alternate director Millions. She's used, and my rationale is, if I can say a few words, is she's quite used to being in the chair as mayor of Comox, so I think she'd be great.
Is there a seconder for the resolution? Okay.
You just do this, get out of it.
And I open the floor to any comments or questions. Alternate Director Minions.
Thank you for that comment. My concern would be I haven't used the mic system before, so I'm not sure if that's a requirement. I would turn that down if it's operated by someone else maybe, but I haven't had the experience of using the mic, so I would worry that I would delay the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. So before we proceed to the next, perhaps directors, given that there's not interest in proceeding, we can either vote down this motion that's been moved in second, or it can be withdrawn with the consent of the board. So is there anyone opposed to withdrawing that motion? Seeing generally nodding of heads. Okay, thank you very much. So now we'll proceed to Director Grant.
Well, I was going to make a resolution that Edwin Greaves be our chair for the day.
Thank you. That's been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions or acceptance or rejection for that matter? Director Grieve.
The honor, and I do have a 3-page speech I'd like to make.
Excellent. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the directors?
He did this because he always does it at times. I do.
Okay. So with that, directors, thank you. And so all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. And Director Colombia, thanks. I saw your vote in favor. Thank you very much. So with that, I'm pleased to turn the meeting over to the presiding member, Director Grieve.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure and honor to do this. Once again, I haven't done it for 10 years as chair. So this is the meeting for Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 of the board of the Comox Valley Regional District. And we don't have a gallery here, so we don't have to go through all the preliminaries around where the exits are and washrooms are and whatnot. So I'm going to start by recognizing that we are doing our business today, thankfully, on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation people. And I just wonder if I could lean upon Richard one more time to do a little acknowledgement of the vote that happened, the historic vote that took place on Saturday, and give us a little synopsis of it. I think it's really important for the public to hear it. Be so kind.
Thanks, Chair. Imut Kwaithkwag and Kwannepe. It's really good to see everybody here today. Imut Namugwis ethnon. My Comox name is Namugwis, which translates to the only one in the world on top. It's a really good name that was provided to me by my great uncle Norman Frank Nim, and he passed that name on to me. He was also passing down his chieftainships to his son Gary Frank, my mom's cousin. Yeah, very historical day on Saturday, as you're all well aware. We were successful, Comox, with its ratification vote for treaty. We had 91% of our eligible voters participate in that ratification vote, and of the 91%, 81% voted in favor of treaty. So it was a very historic, very exciting evening on Saturday for our community and other folks as well. I think I won't go into too much detail. I just think it's really important to again say thank you to all the folks that have supported Comox along the way with regards to the 31 years of trying to get to a ratification vote and a successful ratification vote. Some of the folks that come to mind again on Saturday out in the elements with rain and wind was Director Arbor directing traffic with a smile on his face. Chair Cole Hamilton running around the gym, helping out with picking up plates and garbage and just wishing everybody a good time while they're having their meal. Director Helian, who was there away from his family to come and join the Comox family for a bit. I know he had, a celebration of life to take care of on Sunday, but yet he managed to find some time to come and spend the afternoon with Comox. I know CAO James Warren and Chris Dan were there. Many other folks, Mayor Minions was there, I saw. I'm sure there are lots of other folks that were there, but Saturday was kind of a bit of a blur, and so was Sunday. So I just wanted to, on behalf of our elected council and chief, our hereditary chiefs, our elders, and most importantly, our youth, I just wanted to say thank you again for all the support over the years with regards to us getting to that successful vote. And yeah, there's still lots of work ahead of us, but it's good work. It's work that we want to do and have been wanting to do for quite some time. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Hardy, for being so very gracious. So our first item of business is a recommendation to move to in camera under section 90, 1E, 91I, and 91M. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? And carries. And finally, the closed portion convene immediately follow the open portion of the meeting. So that's a given. Number C is the adoption of minutes. We have 2 minutes for adoption. So first and seconded on the 2 minutes. Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, call the question. Anyone opposed? And that carries. No business arising. Delegation follow-up. A follow-up from the Comox Valley Elders Take Action, a delegation we received here on February 22nd. Over to CAO.
Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon to the directors. As is the board's practice, you receive delegations and then at a subsequent meeting, you will consider whether any action can be taken. As noted on the agenda here, you had that delegation on February 25th and a resolution was endorsed by the UBCM in 2023 at its convention. The chair made note of that during the meeting. And that resolution was to ask the province to waive the fees associated with the home support program in order to make it more accessible, to make it accessible to all seniors regardless of income. That was noted and it's specifically referenced here. Staff don't see any further specific direction to be taken from that delegation, but certainly if the board is interested in providing any additional direction, we can go from there. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any comments or discussion? Director Hillian.
If there was support for it, I'd be prepared to move that we write a letter to the appropriate ministry reminding them of the 2023 resolution, acknowledging the presentation and reiterating our support for the initiative.
So that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Any comments? Seeing none, I'll call a question. Any opposed? And that carries. Thank you, Director. Number 2, asset management policy. Asset management policy P148 was referring to the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board at the July 30th meeting. Is for consideration and comments from the CIO.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just over a month ago, this board, longer than a month ago, this board looked at this asset management policy and did refer it to the solid waste board. The solid waste board did not have any specific feedback or queries on the asset management policy. And so it is back in front of the CVRD board here to consider approval. If need be, we have staff that can speak more directly to the policy itself, but it is as was presented to the board previously.
And questions? Director Brown.
Thanks, Chair. Just curious, I don't see a reference to natural asset management in the asset management policy. Is that the intent or is it just buried there and I don't see it?
Sure, I'll ask Lucy Wacharek to respond. Is the question, maybe I missed the question. Are you looking for an explanation around the reference to natural assets in the policy itself?
Yes, so does the asset management policy actually address natural assets?
Yeah, Lucy.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, Lucy.
And through the chair to the director. The natural assets is included in this policy, and it's the last 2 words that are in the first paragraph. And there may not, I'm going through the whole thing again, it may be mentioned the odd time here or there again, but absolutely we do have it in the scope of the work that we will accomplish through this policy.
Sorry, can you point to it again?
Under-
The last 2 words on the what? On the where?
First paragraph under intent.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries.
And further also,
And-
natural assets are defined later on. So there is coverage of natural assets. So it will be part of the analysis and consideration of this policy.
Excellent. Thank you.
And Director Arbor?
Sometimes life is just wild. Just as Dr. Brown was speaking, I just got a text from Laurie Narrett on Hornby that Minister Osborne and Rural Health Deputy Minister Toporski are coming to the islands on March 24th. So that's like in 2 weeks from now. So I'm just thinking about the item prior around the elders. There was also a discussion of them coming and we're going to give them a tour at home support. So, and we're probably going to do the fire halls and ambulance. So I'm just wondering if staff is going to come to that, you don't need a resolution, do you? You could just be invited and that's it. I just thought I'd check because all of a sudden it's like in 10 days from now.
Yeah, if you share that information with us, I think we can.
Yeah,
take
okay,
a
I
look.
will.
Thanks, Director.
But very timely. I mean, she literally sent this as we were on the item.
Moved and seconded on the recommendation. Any further discussion on the recommendation? Seeing the lights, anyone opposed? That carries. No petitions or delegations. Number 1 report, emergency flood flows project update. A report for receipt on emergency food, I said flood, sorry, emergency food flows, the project updated, and a general discussion regarding the project outcomes and applications for receipt. Move receipt.
Thank-
And seconded. And over to,
Thanks, Chair. And Lisa was able to inform me just before the meeting that I understand Lush Valley Food Action Society and the consultant are not able to attend because of some other unexpected event. So, but they would be able to attend at next week's board meeting, March 18th. So if the board's interested, we can have this matter referred to next week and the
I would think that'd be fair.
consultant and Lush can attend at that time.
Make that motion now.
To defer it.
I'll move that.
Moved by Ken, seconded by Vicky. Okay, so any discussion on deferring it? All in favor? Keep you on your toes. That carries. Hornby and Denman Island Community Bus Transportation Study report for receipt. Move second on receipt. And over to CEO for introductions.
Thank you, Chair. Michael Zabarski, our Manager of Transit and Facilities, will be introducing this staff report, and we can support the discussion to follow. Mike.
Thanks, James. Through the chair to the board, just here to give a quick overview of this staff report. Many of you will know that we've been supporting the communities of Denman and Hornby Island with bus service for a while. 2017 was when the Hornby bus kicked off, and then a few years later on 2021 was Denman Island. These are outside of the BC Transit model. We have worked with BC Transit to kind of understand their interest or abilities to provide service on the islands. They're going to do a service investigation next year, but have already kind of indicated that there's some concerns and hesitation with providing a BC Transit level of service on the two islands. So with that in mind, and in partnership with HighSeek and Denman Works, the two groups on the islands that are currently operating the bus, we hired Watt Consulting to do a bit of review of options, kind of looking at the administration, funding, and operational structures. Watt has a lot of experience with similar smaller sized bus services, especially down in the Southern Gulf Islands and over on Cape Breola. And their work is kind of summarized in one of the appendices here. It's a fairly extensive report on all the options that they looked at, pros and cons. And so their recommendation is to form a single society, kind of a transportation or community bus society with representation from both islands. And that entity would kind of work together, would build resiliency, efficiency. There'd be economies of scale associated with this. They could share resources and administration staffing. They could work together to pursue funding. So that's kind of the basis of that report. Another kind of highlight of that work that would continue would be the society working with the Comox Valley schools to look at any synergies between student transportation and public transportation. We did have a workshop following this study with all of those entities, including the school district, and there was support amongst all parties to continue working towards a single society. Recognizing that we're already into 2025, there was a kind of an understanding that this would unfold over the next several months. So status quo operation on the two islands for this year, and aim for hopefully a society to be created later this summer, and then take over operation of both services starting for 2026. Our role will continue to be to support them, to facilitate, coordinate, provide advice, and then we do obviously provide a substantial amount of funding as well. So not really a big change for us on this front, more of a change for the local island organizations. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments, Director? Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and thanks for your effort to support over the last number of months the discussion between the two islands. And any collaboration between the two islands is never easy. I think we have a couple of examples of cross-island organizations that have actually successfully rooted over the last decades, but it's hard work, and it just relies sometimes it's just different interests. I've talked to a couple of the stakeholders here the last few weeks, and when you say that our role is mostly to support, coming out of these meetings, I didn't really see that they would necessarily. I'm not sure where the gumption for creating that new society is going to come from, and so can you say whether, like, have we said that this is what the CVRD would like to see happen, or anything like that, or we're just like, we're still in mode of just saying, oh, it would be nice if you collaborate, and we're fine with either scenario?
Yeah, I think we've expressed an interest in them kind of combining forces and working together, but we haven't said that that's an official CVRD recommendation or directive. And this study has been kind of structured in a way to, here's an idea. We think it's a great idea. But ultimately we're trying to let the islands decide how they want to operate the bus over there.
Yeah. I guess I'll just say it on the record here is I don't mind taking the heat for providing the directive. I'm not sure that um, it's gonna happen otherwise, to be honest. One of the best things that happened on the island is when BC Housing stepped in, because we had like 4 housing organizations. And BC Housing basically said, on Hornby, they started with Hornby and said, we're not gonna fund your project unless your 2 organizations merge. Then we merged and then they funded us. And right now, that's what's happening on Denman. So with the buses, if we're we just completed a pretty big piece of work. But I just feel like it could end up like a report on the shelf unless we say, and so I don't know from a staff perspective whether you would need a resolution from the board or anything like that, or whether I just need to show up on the island and provide that directive. But I'm just wondering what a good process would be here.
Yeah, I think personally at a staff level, it's hard for us to tell them that this is the way it has to be. And if the board feels strongly that that's, your desire, I think a resolution would go a long way to communicating that to the island.
So I'll pass it to the next speaker and maybe I'll come back with some suggestions.
Thank you. And Director Brown?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just curious, looks like a slide deck or the report, there's federal funding in there in 2026. Is that funding secured or is that an application we're?
Yeah, that would be a grant application that somebody would need to make.
Okay.
So that's not been secured yet, but there is an opportunity. And I think having one single society, that's able to work together to make that application and not compete against each other, I think that's definitely a better way to go.
Yeah, let's encourage that.
Thank you. So we're on receipt. Do you want to move receipt and the director have something to,
No, I won't. I just like.
just a direction?
Yeah,
Okay.
just speaking some more on receipt. Yeah, maybe if the board is amenable, maybe I'd like to bring something back to this board in the next couple of months. And what my thinking is there is as Mike mentioned, like there's much broader opportunities if the islands collaborate, and maybe some of the stick that we can have as a board and myself is, to be honest, if this came together, I would be willing to put community works funds on the table for the electrification of the fleet. All the rest of that could actually come into play, because right now the board knows that these 2 organizations are very much like it's all volunteer. It's old buses. It's like it's not a long-term model for servicing the islands, right? So I'll try to craft something for next month, maybe to bring back. Would that be helpful?
Yep. Okay.
And if I can get some staff support on that to review whatever I write, that would be great in the form of.
Or CEO on that?
For sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's sounds like a good follow-up set of actions. So we'll be in touch to support you in something to come back to the board at a future meeting.
Great. Good work. Anything else, Mike?
Nope.
That's it.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So we are in receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt on that? And that carries. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome alternate director Zolker here on behalf of the city of Courtenay, sitting at the big table. Good to see you. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for. This is the recommended financial plan report dated March 7th regarding the 2025-2029 recommended financial plan, and to request the board's consideration for first, second, and third reading. Moved and seconded, and over to CEO for introductions.
Thank you, Chair. So on January 20th, your proposed budget was published online. Since then, not only have you met in 13 meetings to deliberate the 99 CVRD services, you've also made some important and challenging decisions to change and reduce several budgets to reflect the current economic, social, and environmental conditions affecting us all. Since that time, also, the world has changed and continues to change. As one example, tariffs and counter tariffs are almost daily talking point, and clarity is far from certain. Lucy Wilczarek, our Chief Financial Officer, will speak more directly to the financial plan, process, and outcome, but I'd like to take a few minutes to share my observations about the 2025 to 29 budget and CVRD services. Following the board's budget adoption, which is proposed for next Tuesday, the CVRD has an opportunity to continue delivering quality services at cost-effective levels, thereby protecting our communities, businesses, and those most vulnerable. In doing so, however, we must also be mindful around expanding on our services and programs during these times of economic uncertainty. I feel that we must look for opportunities to stay connected and focus on priorities together with other government agencies and community groups for the good of the Comox Valley. As members of the public service, we all have a responsibility to our taxpayers and to work towards the bigger picture. Throughout the budget meetings, I've made several observations and will summarize them here in 4 points. Number 1, operations. The approved budgets will allow staff to continue to treat water for drinking, teach young people how to swim, and keep our parks and greenways safe for public enjoyment. These are only a few of the many different operational activities that have real and positive impacts in the Comox Valley. Number 2, capital projects. The approved budget supports some major initiatives, including to realize a new sewer conveyance line between Courtney, Comox, and the Brent Road treatment plant, a second artificial turf for soccer, baseball, field hockey, and others, and fire halls at Mount Washington and Union Bay. Number 3, reserves. There is work to be done to build reserves for many of our services. The board and its committees and commissions all identified the importance of having sound and structured decision-making processes to set targets. Staff are working on these elements and noted the benefits that coherent policies will bring to services, including the recreation complexes, the rural and regional park services, and rural community halls, to name just a few. 4th, opportunities. Several initiatives are supported through the recommended budget, and we will bring related reports forward throughout the year as those projects evolve and we need board input and direction. Some of those initiatives are not without conflict and uncertainty. Specifically, I'm thinking about Service 450, housing, Service 625, regional parks and trails, Service 265, search and rescue, and several community hall services in the rural areas. I'm excited to see how those topics evolve. As you can see from these brief comments, but also from your involvement throughout the budget discussions, there are some real opportunities to advance important projects and continue providing quality services at cost-effective levels. Protecting our communities, businesses, the environment, and those most vulnerable will be at the forefront of CVRD service delivery in 2025. And we'll be ever mindful about any program and service expansion. To close, I encourage your continued engagement on some of the more challenging topics and services and finding ways to work together for the public. Also, thank you for your direction, interest, and constructive collaboration to get to this point, where Lucy will now introduce the recommended financial plan. Lucy.
Thank you very much, CAO, for that synopsis. That was excellent. And over to Lucy.
Thank you so much. So good afternoon, Chair Directors through the CAO to the Chair. The staff and I are pleased to be here today just to bring you the 2025 CVRD recommended financial plan. So now we are here in March and we are at that final stage of the budget process. All CVRD services have now received the required endorsement of proposed budgets. Where follow-up and amendments were required, these have now been completed. The 2024 carry forward amounts and year-end surplus figures have been finalized. So where possible and financially sound, finance has incorporated the use of prior year surplus and/or FFE reserves to alleviate taxation increases. This aligns with the direction from the board in considering the current economic situation. The individual budgets have been drawn together in the recommended budget. Oops. So just super brief presentation today. I'll just touch on the operating and the capital budget. The focus today is primarily on 2025 and the change that occurred between your proposed and recommended budget. We'll circle in once again to levels of taxation, and we're doing this by core service and the implications to our households, and a quick update on public participation. The recommended operating budget is $111.6 million. This is a change of just over $10 million from the proposed. The biggest component of the $10 million change is related to the 2024 carry forwards and the surplus, and I'll just speak to that in a moment or two. But first, I just wanted to touch on the amendments put forward through budget deliberation. The CVRD board amended the proposed search and rescue budget to increase support for a new facility for the Comox Valley Ground Search and Rescue by $100,000. As well, the board asked that service 450 be aligned with the foundational strategic option, and this reduced taxation by $500,000. Taxation for service 500 planning has been reduced by $320,000, and this through the use of FFE reserve and 2024 surplus. Service 625, regional parks and trails, has seen a reduction in taxation, and this is the result of the Regional Parks and Trails Committee taking a scaled down approach to building reserve dollars for future parkland, deferring personnel dollars while still maintaining a focus on the completion of the land acquisition strategy. Some smaller changes have been made to grants as well. So also included in the change, it's not listed here as a bullet, is approximately $385,000 in further reductions to taxation. This is the result of finance's review to alleviate some of the pressures on taxation through the use of the reserves and the surplus, as I mentioned earlier. Many of the changes were small in nature, but I just wanted to note three of the largest. For transit services, that's been brought down by $163,000. Regional growth strategy by $104,000, and the electoral area administration by almost $50,000 or $49,000. So with the 2024 year-end process now almost complete, the unfinished projects and surplus positions have been added into this recommended budget. 3.02 million represents carry forward projects and 6.87 in surplus. The recommended capital budget is 102.8 million. That being a change of $41 million, and this represents the carry forward projects. Our CIO touched on the major ones. These four projects make up the bulk of it. The sewer conveyance, our water south service extension project is ongoing, Royston conversion to Comox Valley Water, Mount Washington Fire Hall. So as we move on, this slide helps to demonstrate how taxation has changed over the budget process, this broken down by core service. At the proposed stage, taxation was included at $36.2 million, this being a change of $3.6 million from 2024 levels, or 11.2%. The recommended budget includes $34.9 million in taxation. This brings the change down to $2.3 million, or 7.2%. That's a 4% reduction in taxation, or in dollar form, a $1.2 million drop from the proposed to recommended. So what does this mean? What does the recommended budget mean to Comox Valley households? Staff have completed the updates to tax rates per service and have refreshed the estimated implications to households. The year-over-year change ranges from $39.20 to $61.05 for municipalities. On the slide, we did include those estimates that were given at the proposed stage. The tax savings between proposed and recommended for municipalities is approximately $20. And for our electoral areas, the change ranges from $32.62 to $133. The difference from where we started in the budget process to what is in the budget before you today is in that last column. The difference ranging from a decrease of $36 for Hornby Island to $63 per year for Area B. From a public participation perspective, just summarized by saying that our participation was about the same as it was the year before, 5 questions, and we did have 4 items of feedback as well. options in front of the board today are to endorse the recommended budget and proceed with 3 readings, recommend further adjustments to the recommended budget. And our next steps will include, once the bylaw is fully established, the budget package information currently on the website will be updated to reflect your approved budget. The new budget is activated within our internal systems, and this is what will allow our departments to move forward with the plans. The requisitions will be sent out to partner municipalities, and rural taxation information will be forwarded to the province. And that for those rural areas, tax inserts will be provided as a means to inform of implications and service enhancements. We recommend that the board adopt the recommended budget, and we are open for any further questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Lucy. And we do have questions, starting with Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. Another budget cycle, and thank you to staff for all the work. And I know there were a couple of moments where there were some quick turnarounds with our compressed schedule when we were asking for adjustments. So thank you for going along with that. On slide 8, I think that's what I was asking for at the beginning of the budget process, where an actual percentage, because I felt this year we were flying a little bit blind, and now we can see it like the 11%. So I appreciate that you put that down today, and so we moved from 11% to 7%. I think if we started at 11%, I would have jumped. I think that figure would probably have impact on the board as well if we had, because we had to look at every single budget and we didn't have a top figure, right? So in a way, it's good diligence in the regional district context, because it forces you to look at every single budget. But that top line is so useful both for the public and for ourselves, you know, because again, I'll use that analogy of just flying blind a bit with one meter missing. But overall, 7% is what we're looking at. On average, it will vary wildly across the regional district, but at the same time, I think that's an indicator of the work we've done and that reduction that we worked on, considering the times we're in. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments. And Alternate Director Millions.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lucy, for the presentation. I'm just wondering on page 9 of the presentation, where it's going over what it means to Comox Valley households. The typical residential property for Courtenay, Comox, and Cumberland are all relatively in the same range, but Comox has a $61 increase, while Courtenay, Cumberland are sitting around 40 to 45. Is there a easy explanation kind of for why the increase is larger there on town of Comox?
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to take it, or do you want to? Yes. As you, through the chair, probably as you're aware as well, there's differences in the services that each one of the municipal partners takes part in for one. So that's a piece of it. This is calculated on the typical assessed values, and Comox is the highest, right, in that grouping. Yes. And if you would like us to pull out the assessed values for you, just to tell you what they are, we can certainly do that. Yes, it's just easier for Kelly to, who's got it up on her screen, to actually just comment about it.
Thank you for the question.
Mm-hmm.
So Comox had the highest assessed values. Last year, they were 788,000 for the median. This year, it's 830,000. They also had the highest year-over-year growth as well at 5%. Courtenay had 2%. Sorry, not growth, but increase over the assessed values. Courtenay's was at 2%, and Cumberland's was also at 2%.
Director Millions. Did you want to speak? No? Okay. Director McCall.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for providing this summary and highlighting the changes that we've gone through in our series of meetings. I think it's an important summary for us to see the work of what it means to go through all these budgets. And as was highlighted, I think we heard there was 13 budget meetings in total. So just a huge thank you to staff for all the work that's involved in this and responding to to the changes that have been asked for. I had a couple of questions. My first one is directed at table 1 in the staff report. I found this table was really helpful in just, again, providing that snapshot of how the budget that as it's being presented today has changed through the course of the process. And so the reduction to taxation is broken out really clearly there, and that's great. The one thing I had a question about in this table was there's a $3.6 million change to senior government grants, which is fairly significant. I'm just wondering if staff can provide some information on that change.
Yeah, details for that. Yeah, it's just generally overall, the figure is about carry forwards. And it's grants that are related to those carry forward projects. And if you'd like further detail on that, we can look it up, but if that's okay.
No, that's totally adequate. Yeah, I was just curious about that one. And then the other one, which I think may have a similar answer, although it's a totally different question, in the proposed versus recommended, it shows an increase in operating costs of about $7 million, although in the course of the budget process, we've kind of reduced some of the, aspects of what was proposed. So it's significant, and I think it lines up with some of the carry forward numbers in the report, but if you could just highlight what those differences are.
Through the chair, for sure. Also related to the carry forward projects, so over $3.1 million of those takes into account some of the reductions that we've made. Is there anything else, Kelly, that comes to your mind?
So not all the carry forwards were.
Oh, your mic is off.
Grant funded. They were also. Sorry. The carry forwards, not all of them were 100% grant funded. There was different shares. So the 7.9 would represent our share as well as the grant funding portion.
Yeah, and I guess in my mind, usually carry forward projects are more related to capital, but in this case, there's some operational projects that are captured in that.
Yeah, there were significant operational projects still within Service 500 and 512, the regional growth strategy, and planning. There was carry forwards, large carry forwards in 270, the emergency management. Some operational carry forwards for recreation, quite a few operational initiatives.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarity.
And alternate director Zolliger, you want to speak?
Thanks, Chair. Just on the same table 1, also a quite a large change under prior year surplus of 7.9 million. So I guess kind of a two-parter. One being, is that unencumbered surplus that the board has to consider? And the second piece of that, would that also be as a result of carry forward projects or projects that weren't able to be completed?
Yes, through the chair, that $7 million figure is made up of $3.02 million worth of carry forward, and $6.7 million is surplus figure. So unallocated surplus, unencumbered surplus that's come forward.
Okay, just as a follow-up, Chair, if I can, is there a policy that the board considers what to do with the surplus? Is that going into reserves? Is that being utilized for anything specifically through the budget process?
Through the chair, currently the financial policy that this board has adopted does not go that deep into what exactly to do with surpluses. Generally speaking, our practice is that we try to flow most of those dollars into the FFE reserves. So that's what happens generally with it. As we move forward and we address and do that work that's associated with our fiscal sustainability framework, our intent is to come back around to each one of our reserves and be setting those max and minimums in relation to what that whole service is about and what that service needs. So we will have more defined information about how a any excess surplus may help with tax, specifically help with tax stabilization to the future. So that all being said, from a surplus perspective, and here I'm just saying once again that surplus from a prior year is a one-time type revenue, and you don't want to be relying on that. So we have used, I guess I would say, best practice in this organization in the past on how we have managed that surplus figure, and as it gets down in writing, it will certainly be looked at as a one-time revenue, and just be cautious about how we use that going to the future as well. So I hope that long-winded explanation gave you an answer. And as you see, it's one use for surplus, and driving that into reserve as we've used it in this budget. Uncertain times that we're facing, and we've done our best to be able to bring some of that in to help with tax stabilization where we could.
Thank you. And Director Hillian?
Thanks, Chair. I just want to clarify the $100,000 increase to search and rescue. Is that on top of the existing $100,000 that we have been giving?
Through the chair, yes, it is.
So that's $200,000 a year. I'd like to really encourage staff to make some noise about that, because in my experience, there's still a perception in the community that local government does not, in fact, support search and rescue to the extent that it should. And I think this is a significant amount. And I know the board would be prepared to step forward further if search and rescue came forward with some land and the opportunity to actually get a new facility. So I really think it's worthwhile for us to make the community more aware than they are of this particular initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Yeah, we tend not to blow our own horn, which is contrary to the atypical politician. We have Chair Cole Hamilton that wants to speak. I don't see the hand up, but I'm sure you still want to speak. Will? Are you coming through? You're muted.
You got me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thanks so much. I say I'm happy to be voting in support of this. I think it's been a really great process, and I appreciate the changes that have come along the way. It's not been easy, and it's certainly been a very unique context in which to be crafting a budget the way the world is changing around us from day to day. So I just appreciate the steady hand of staff, and I just want to thank Lucy, Kelly Broughton, Jared Sexton, Laura Korn, and just everyone else in the finance department and all of the budget managers and other staff in the RD departments. It's always a busy time of year, and when I talk to people in other parts of the country and mention that we have 100+ budgets to prepare every year and review, it's something that, anyway, it blows their minds. So the fact we get it done and get it done well every year is greatly appreciated. So I know hopefully in the room we could manage a round of applause, and I really appreciate the efforts of all.
I'll turn the mic off so you can hear us.
Thank you.
Yes, we thank the province of BC with their unique concept of regional districts and our 109 different services or whatever you have to cope with every year. So I think I see no more lights on. So we're going to call the question on receipt. Anybody opposed to receipt? That carries. And if somebody wants to move the recommendation, move and second on the recommendation. Any further discussion on that? I'm going to call this one as all in favor. Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. And of course, we need a little money to get from here to there. Number 4, Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 863, 2025 for receipt. Over to CEO.
Thank you, Chair. Kelly Broughton, our Manager of Financial Planning, will be introducing this staff report and will be able to provide support to the discussion. Kelly.
Thank you. Through the CAO to the chair. Staff are here to present the 2025 Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw. Under the Local Government Act, a short-term loan can be established through a revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw. It is used to fund temporary cash flow shortages resulting from the timing of current expenditures and grant claim reimbursement, as the CBRD does not receive the taxation revenue until August 1st. A new bylaw and subsequent loan must be established each year, and the borrowed funds must be repaid in full by August 31st. The CBRD can borrow through either their established financial institution, which is currently RBC, or through the Municipal Finance Authority. As the borrowing bylaws for a maximum of 25 million, MFA has been our primary lender of choice. Unlike a revolving line of credit, funds can only be borrowed once to the maximum loan amount. Although finance looks to all other sources of funding first, the revenue anticipation can be used for the several large infrastructure projects that we have in place with the grant funding attached. There can be significant delays between grant reimbursement claims and the subsequent payment. The large expenditures can impact the already strained operational cash flow resources. During 2024, the loan was accessed twice for a total of 5.91 million and was repaid in full before the August 31st deadline. And thank you, and we're here for any questions.
Any questions? Looks like it's all understood. Thank you very much. So on receipt, any opposed? That passes, and the recommendation. Moved and seconded on the recommendation. I see no lights on the recommendation. Call the question. Anyone opposed to the recommendation? Then that carries as well. Number 5, Regional Growth Strategy Amendment Consultation Plan. There's a report for receipt. Moved and seconded on receipt, and over to CEO.
Thank you. Brian Chow, our Planner 2 Long Range, and Robin Holm, our Manager of Long Range Planning and Sustainability, are both joining us at the table. And I think Brian will be introducing the report here and supported by your team for discussion. So Brian, over to you.
There you go, Brian. You're on the air.
Thank you. Through the CEO to the chair and directors, as directed by the board in 2022, CBRD staff conducted a scoping exercise for the regional growth strategy review. This process took over a series of meetings in 2022 and 2023 in collaboration with the RGS Technical Advisory Committee, or known as TAC, which includes the 4 planning managers and other staff such as engineers from member municipalities. In January 2023, the Technical Advisory Committee presented its recommendations to the RGS Steering Committee, consisting of the 4 CAOs. The Steering Committee endorsed the proposed scope for the RGS amendment. In early 2023, the board initiated an RGS amendment and confirmed the scope met the criteria for minor amendments. The proposed targeted updates of the RGS include incorporating recent census data, boundary adjustments, revised greenhouse gas reduction targets, and the CVRD's Indigenous Relations Framework. Modernizing the RGS while maintaining the current land use and growth management framework and ensuring that the amendment complies with Part 13 of the Local Government Act and Section 5.2 of the RGS under a minor amendment process. Appendix A of the package is the consultation plan and is ready for board endorsement. This plan outlines the rights holders, interested parties, engagement approaches, and project timelines. In the consultation plan, these are the key consultation groups. The first is Comox First Nations and others. With this group, the consultation will be respectful and flexible, recognizing our adjacency to Comox treaty lands. It will enforce collaboration commitments related to growth management and its impacts on the planning and management of Comox lands. It is adapted to their interests, availability, and capacity. For member municipalities, consultation and collaboration will continue to be through the RGS TAC and Steering Committee. Both committees will review and provide feedback on the draft bylaw. For the Intergovernmental Advisory Committee, or IAC, this is done through the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs, which will be consulted on convening such a committee to represent provincial interests. This committee will ensure compliance with the Local Government Act, with RGS amendment, and provide guidance on First Nations consultation. Other agencies will be consulted based on their specific interess. For the general public in general, they will be informed through the CVRD website, which will be served as an information hub. So a lot of work has been done to get to here. As mentioned earlier, since 2022, CVRD staff has worked with TAC, which again include the planning managers and other staff, and steering committee for the scoping exercise. Furthermore, over the past 2 years of preparatory work, staff had to assess whether the two impacts of key pieces of legislation on the project's direction. The first was the Complete Communities Program, which required municipalities to conduct assessments to guide land use decisions. The results of these assessments do not conflict with the current vision, objectives, and goals of the RGS. The second was the small-scale multi-unit housing or SMU legislation by the province, which also did not require an amendment to the RGS because the existing RGS growth management framework already aligns well with the provincial legislation by directing growth to serviced areas. Both provincial initiatives support sustainable, efficient, and inclusive community development, which are already aligning well with the RGS growth management framework. Additionally, prior to preparing the consultation plan and the draft RGS today, the RGS TAC met last September on project progress. Today is here to present for board endorsement of the consultation plan. Following the board endorsement, CVRD long-range staff will initiate an engagement through Q2 and Q3 of this year. For example, letters will be sent to Comox First Nation and others to introduce the draft RGS and will take directions from them. The draft RGS will be distributed to the RGS TAC and Steering Committee for the review. Other agencies, interested parties, and the public will be informed by email and website updates as appropriate. In Q3, staff will incorporate feedback and return to the board with updated RGS for authorization to forward the bylaw to affected local governments for first reading. The target completion of this ambitious project is by this year's end, with flexibility depending on First Nations participation. Any timeline changes will be brought to the board for endorsement. Appendix B of the package is a copy of the draft RGS with annotated changes throughout to show that the changes is attempted to modernize the plan while staying within its defined scope and maintaining existing vision, objectives, and goals. There are a couple additional considerations for the board to note. One is that the changes do not have any material impact on residents anticipated, as the changes are already endorsing the board adopted decisions and data, such as dissolution of the Economic Development Service, adding Indigenous framework, housing needs data and demographic data, and GHG emissions data. And also by 2027, in 2 years' time, the board will have to consider whether to review the RGS for more fulsome review or not. Any changes outside the predefined scope of the minor amendment will have an opportunity to be considered in a couple of years. So the board, here's the summarized recommendation for you to consider tonight. One is to approve the consultation plan. Two is to confirm that the proposed targeted changes meet minor amendment criteria. Three, to authorize staff to implement the consultation plan right away. And four, to request municipal staff to participate in the review process. My team and I are available to answer any questions you may have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And we're starting off with Director Harbour.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the comprehensive presentation. I I know we started this journey a couple of years ago when we decided to go the route of the minor amendment, so the ship has sailed, but I think I might, I would have a lot more questions 2 years later around minor amendment versus major. It's interesting. I think it's last year, Alana and I went to the Cowichan Valley and gave a presentation on the regional growth strategy, and they're now actually doing it. And it's actually raising a lot of issues, which actually then I'm reflecting back on what's happening in our valley. For example, right now, the hot topic is South Cowichan. Like, there's this recognition that electoral area directors that have 8,000 people, like that's a huge task. You know, and they realize that some of their electoral areas are bigger than the municipal areas. And in our case, Cumberland is half the size of each of the three areas. In their case, their process of regional growth strategy may lead to incorporation of some of those electoral areas, even though they still have that rural flavor. So it's interesting to watch how they go about it. I guess my question is one of the projects in Area A may change a little bit, and that's raising for me a lot of questions around the RGS. And is it within, so I have two parts to my question. One is, will there be, I didn't hear a lot about consulting with the elected officials as part of the consultation plan. I think a lot of it is at staff level. So I'm just wondering if there's a plan, like who represents the areas, right? Because you're going to consult with member municipality staff. And are you going to consult with yourself? Or are you going to come to the ESC table? My question is, would a settlement growth revision as part of what we're doing right now, could that be considered a minor amendment? If we did a revision to the map of the settlement growth expansion areas.
Alana?
Through the chair to the directors, thank you. We'll tag team a little bit. I've lived with the RGS, so these nuances just a little bit longer. So I'll just speak to this part. So if the settlement expansion areas, for example, when a municipality incorporates those areas, an amendment to the RGS is not required. But the municipality, until such time as they update their OCP to amend the policies for that area, is expected to abide the rural official community plan in those areas. So we've seen that unfold a couple of times. The settlement node could be considered, settlement node boundaries could be considered, which would trigger an amendment to the RGS. And depending on the nature, we would come back to you and suggest to whether or not it was a minor or a standard amendment. Just to kind of give you some examples, like if a settlement node boundary was amended in order to enable development of a specific property, we would suggest to you that that wasn't a minor amendment and should trigger a standard amendment process. If, for example, the amendment was undertaken for in order to service failing systems, that would likely be something that we could speak to about how we could do a minor amendment working with the province if it was around addressing health risk or environmental concerns.
Thanks. Can I have a follow-up?
Sorry, I also heard a question there about consulting or engaging with the Electoral Area Services Committee. And yes, that would be one of the presentations to be made. Oh, sorry, Brian put his light on there. So I think there is that intent in the consultation plan.
Yes, well, the consultation plan includes, consulting all the APCs in A, B, and C, as well as the Agriculture Advisory Planning Commission. So the EA type of consultation will be done through the APCs and agricultural APCs.
Yeah, okay, that's all helpful. I guess I'll be more specific because we are at the board on this item right now. I'm not as much concerned, well, there is some concerns, there's always concern, and Dr. Hardy and Grieve share it around how those boundary expansions are done. And I know the last one in Area A was pretty badly done. That's a number of years ago now, that's about 10 years ago, but we're always wary of that happening again. We realize that currently there's not a council that doesn't appear like the municipal councils are looking that way. But My concern is more, what if an area identified in a jurisdiction never has intent to actually go into it? And I'll be more specific. I'll talk about Royston, where we're actually bringing municipal style services, but only halfway without the benefit of municipal incorporation. And as I consider some of these projects and whether scope may change around these projects, what do you do? Like, what's the incentive for electoral areas to invest all of their funds and all that if the residents end up paying quite a lot for services but do not get the full benefits of being incorporated? So my question is, if we wanted to remove Royston as an expansion area so that we have that security that it stays rural, is that something that could be considered?
Through the chair to the directors, you could certainly consider amending the boundaries of any of the settlement expansion areas inwards, for example. And that was something that seemed like it might be something you would want to consider several years ago when we were looking at our growth rates. So if that is a direction that you'd like to give us to come back to talk about what that might look like, I would suggest to you, if you're amenable, that that be part of the 5-year standard review that we would suggest to you, you initiate in 2027. And then we could look at the infrastructure plans, both regionally as well as the municipal plans, about how the municipalities are going to be meeting their housing targets to understand that full implication of the boundaries of those settlement expansion areas.
One more, Dr. I really,
One more is fine.
thanks. I really like the first part of your comments, that it could be looked at. The second part, I guess my hesitance, I would love to see it come back to the ESC table and maybe the other tables as well, because my hesitance is in the span of those 2 years, Area A is going to have to make some pretty significant commitments on the infrastructure side, which I think after that will completely disincentivize any movement by the municipalities to move in that direction, because those decisions on infrastructure will already have been made. And yeah, so I'm in a pickle, right? I think 2 years ago I supported a minor amendment. I realized this might be a bit, but you opened the door to say that maybe we could look at map adjustments as part of it. So I would love at least to have a discussion, at least at the ESC table around it.
Any other questions at this point? Alderman Director Joliker.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, that has my brain spinning on a whole different wavelength that I hadn't thought about before. But I guess my question to staff, a little surprised about how little the budget is for this. In particular, I'm really mindful of the board's experience recently and the community's experience recently with the AEP process and the criticisms that the board received, and I think politicians of all stripes received around the process in itself. Whatever your opinion is on those criticisms, I think we and many directors have shared that we're functioning and living in a misinformation, disinformation era. And I appreciate in the IAP2 assessment, staff have identified that the public is on the informed side of the spectrum. And I think what I heard really clearly as an alternate, but I'm sure the board permanent directors also heard clearly that the public had strong feelings around the way they were engaged through that process. And so, yeah, $5,000, not a lot. I think staff have budgeted 500 to 1,000 for social media. And so, I guess I agree if I would like to hear why the assessment on Inform, given the context of minor amendments. I think I don't see them being politically hot potatoes, but in this time, maybe one of those items in scope could become something of an issue, or that folks might find there to be an issue. And so why Inform? And then my second piece to that is what would staff be able to recommend for the board to consider potentially increasing at least the engagement with the public. I think that's where my concerns. I think the First Nations piece is all that seems pretty on par, but I am concerned about the public engagement. So hoping to hear from staff on that.
Brian.
Sorry. Through the CEO to alternate director Jolicoeur. First of all, the RGS amendments done under Part 13 of the LGA, which is different from the Part 14 of the LGA of the land use zoning. And in Part 13 of the LGA, public hearing is actually an optional venue, and it's up to the board to decide whether a public hearing is needed or not. So that's the first part. The second part is the proposed changes are the focus has been all to modernize the information that's contained in the RGS, which was prepared in 2010 and adopted in 2011. So there's a lot of outdated information that should be freshened and modernized. So that's the reason why their engagement consultation is so narrow, just because this is a very targeted amendment. So none of the policies, growth management framework have been altered. It's just to freshen up and modernize it and maybe set the stage for the next time it's required to review in 2 years' time. And I'll let my colleagues to jump in if needed.
Thanks, Brian. Through the chair to the directors. I think the only thing that I would supplement that with would be to suggest that we don't really feel like there would be a lot of meaningful room within the context of these amendments for us to take feedback from the public. So for example, in the context of our GHG inventory, we might hear criticism, someone that might wonder, why are we doing this? Why are we accounting? And what do we do with the results? I think with this amendment, what we would suggest to that person, however, is that we're just using a standard methodology to calculate, and that's what's ending up here. So your point is really well taken about reaction to the alternative approval process. At the staff level, we also had a number of learnings through that experience, which certainly will bring to bear during this process. I guess what I would say to you is that if we find that we are hearing a lot of concern about what's in here, we would bring that back to you in speaking, as Brian had said, about what the scope and shape of the 2027 review could be. Rather than indicating, I would hate to go through a process suggesting to the public that we use their time and energy to do deep consultation on these things, and then for them to learn that, well, my goodness, my feedback really, there was no, impact of my feedback having been given. So I would suggest to you that from our perspective, we'd like to bring that to you for the 2027 review and build a plan for that initiative based on the sentiment that will be within the public, probably in a couple of years as it is now.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I guess just a comment from our staff persons identifying in the staff report, it speaks to the LGA's capacity to have a public hearing. And I would just say that I guess I'm more in favor of having kind of open houses where there's more nuanced conversation, facilitated conversation. I think the evidence and the research that we're seeing in local government across Canada is saying that public hearings are not the avenue to engage with the public, especially on technical aspects that staff have identified. Chair, I do have another separate question. I don't see any other lights, if that's okay. Okay. The TAC, my question is around the TAC and referrals to municipalities. So just curious what that process will look like. I've heard that the current TAC have endorsed this recommendation, but in terms, or maybe it's not the TAC, but the CAOs of the local municipal partners. So curious what the role of, and maybe kind of adding to Director Arbor's comments around what the role of the electeds and the individual municipal bodies beyond our technical expertise in our city managers.
Brian?
Yes. Okay, through this CEO chair to Director Jolicoeur. First of all, just a reminder, TAC is where it's comprises of 4 planning managers, and to get to this stage, there were 5 meetings that occur for the past several years, And the composition of the meetings are not fixed. While I was not attending back then as a staff member, I did notice that the minutes indicated there were mixture. There was a composition of engineers or relevant staff, key staff that are needed to come up with their technical expertise to be brought forward here. Whatever recommendation that the TAC created, they will be sent to the steering committee, which are made up of the 4 CAOs, where they would have meetings, discussions, and then depending on the outcome, then they would endorse a recommendation to the board. So I don't know the nuance, what happens from steering committee to the board, as not privy to it, but that's my understanding is that the TAG has a core group of planning managers, bring the expertise, but it's not fixed. It can be change the shape depending on what's needed. So moving forward for this consultation plan, if the board endorses the recommendation as presented, then this package, actually, they have already been sent to the planning managers prior to today's meeting. And then, but there'll be a request for formal meetings will be done through them. And depending on the outcome of the meetings, one or more meetings can occur to incorporate their feedback and then present it to the steering committee and ultimately to the board. So that's my attempt at this reply. And Alana would like to give you more insight onto it.
Okay, I'm just getting something clear myself. As the very last living fossil to actually have participated in the original regional growth strategy, this is what now this is our 3rd review, correct? Going forward. Well, yeah, because we skipped one out. We said there was no need for it. So, did you want to chime in on something, Alana? On directly to that? Okay, I'll let you speak.
Thank you, Chair. Just to the piece about presentations to electeds, we built in the period of March to June 2025 that we're happy to present to Electoral Area Services Committee and the councils, taking that lead from your staff. So if that's something that you think you'd be interested in, then certainly share that with your CAO and that will trickle down to us and we'll do that. On the EASC side, it is very much our intention that we'll be doing that. Thank you.
I'm very heartened to hear that because, we do represent about 25,000 people and 4/5 the land mass, as I always keep saying. So like I was saying in the original reiteration of the regional growth strategy, there was Mayor Craig Phelps, Mayor Fred Bates, Mayor Paul Ives, and I was the lowly representative of the electoral areas when for the first one. Well, at least we had representation, which was good because I don't think it's in the act, is it? It's not. I don't think it does specify that the electoral areas get rid. Well, that's heartening. So I think we've got a way forward. Certainly, I think it's being made plain that this is more of a housekeeping exercise this time round. But if we're going to go for the big fish, we're going to have to wait till 2027. And then the 20 years is after that. And the 20 years, do we not have to actually do a full review of the regional growth strategy, correct?
The requirement in the Act is that you consider whether or not to do a review at least every 5 years. Yeah, and generally, as you know, Director Grieve, the goal is to be using a 20-year planning horizon, which is you might recall Brian referenced earlier that our idea is that our RGS aligns well with the provincial legislation. You'll recall that the provincial legislation is also telling communities that our OCPs must be planning for that 20-year housing needs and population projection needs. So yeah, all comes together in a 20-year plan that you consider at least once every 5 years whether to review.
Thank you. So we're still on receipt? Any more discussion on receipt? Call the question on receipt. Anybody opposed? That carries. Move and second on the recommendation. Any further discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, anyone opposed to the recommendation? That also carries. Thank you very, very much. Good job. Thank you, staff. This is always a touchy subject. We're going to move on to the Town of Comox Service Review Initiation Report for receipt. Move a second on receipt. And Director Minions, did you want to say something there? Sorry?
I can wait till after receipt.
Okay.
Just in the queue. Thank you.
Over to the CEO for introductions.
Thanks, Chair. Jake Martins, General Manager of Corporate Services, is here to provide this presentation. And then the report has been put together by a few of us. So certainly we'll be here to support the discussion. And Jake, over to you.
Thank you, James, and through the chair. Yes, so this report provides a response to the Town of Comox's initiation of a service review for Service 450, which was the emergency shelter and supportive housing land acquisition service and is now the Comox Valley Housing Service. Provincial legislation provides for service reviews to enable the regional district and their service partners to review the terms and conditions of existing service arrangements. These dispute resolution processes are viewed as a necessary and beneficial process where a participating jurisdiction can raise issues where they may experience concerns or frustrations, where the partner's vision changes, or where local conditions change. The report outlines the broad statutory process for service reviews, which in short, provide for a preliminary meeting of the service review participants, and then this is followed by negotiations to seek resolution. The preliminary meeting and the subsequent negotiations are to be supported by a third-party neutral facilitator. Given the recently relatively explicit interest of the Town of Comox to withdraw from the service, staff have outlined two options for the board's consideration. The first is to proceed with initiating the service review in accordance with the statutory framework. And the second is to direct the Chief Administrative Officer to first explore the issues raised by the town in a cursory fashion with the municipal chief administrative officers and the electoral area directors to see if there may be consensus on altering the service participants or potentially other terms and conditions that may quash the need for a service review. In recognition that the town's potential exit from the service may have consequences and implications for the other participants in the service, staff are recommending that we proceed with the service review process, but we will certainly take your direction in this regard. With that, Mr. Chair, as James noted, myself and others are pleased to answer any questions should there be any.
I'm going to take Director Minions first because she did have her light on first and then took me through. So.
Thank you, Chair. I made the grave error of turning the button off, so thank you for recognizing that. I think it's good timing to be the alternate director for this item this evening. I just wanted to speak to Comox Council's motion in January to do the service review with the purpose of exiting. It was discussed around the table to go to a service review with negotiation, and it was decided and voted on that it would be with the full intent to exit. So I just wanted to make sure that we spoke to that before a decision is made about a service review. And also just to speak to the notion that Comox Council fully does intend to support affordable housing initiatives in the region, similar to how we act with 451, that we would be there with our affordable housing reserve, which will have close to $1 million potentially in the next 12 months to look for every opportunity to collaborate with the rest of the region. That being said, I would be, depending on what the board feels, amenable to having a quicker exit and not having the service review based on the decision that Comox Council has initiated for the purpose of exiting. So if it was more expeditory to getting the housing authority up and going, Comox does want to be a player in future with funding, but we don't intend to be a part of the service. And that was made clear with our letter to the minister and to the board. So if there was any expediency available, we would be looking at that option. So thank you again for entertaining this request from Town of Comox.
Thank you very much for that clarity. And Director Harper?
Yeah, thanks. That all actually sounds very, very reasonable to me. And And I want to congratulate Comox on actually their press releases. They've managed to make more noise about their affordable housing investment in the last 2 weeks than we are with our new housing authority, which will be the big kid in town. But this being said, I am fully supportive of a quick exit for the town of Comox for 2 reasons. One is that clarity that is at the town council, so I don't expect anything will change there and that a negotiated process would lead anywhere but where we are today. And number 2, there are 0 assets in that service to discuss. So my preference would be for our board to let them loose free and clear, no cost. I know in the past there's been a long history of asking for costs and stuff like that, but the service is barely existent. It's about to be existent. But I would just say let's cut to the chase, let them, and then that allows our board on the important work of building that housing authority rather than being in never-ending debates with Comox. And then my last comment would be if Comox wishes to change their minds in the future in the next few years, I think Director Grant himself said that at one of the meetings in December, that maybe they'll be proven wrong and they want to join the service in a couple of years if we have this really successful vehicle, then at that time they can, right? So I really want to show support for what Director Minions, alternate Director Minions said. Cheers.
Well, thank you for that, Director Arbor. Director Brown.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'm also amenable to a quick release, but having not been part of a service review at this table, it would be great if somebody could give me like a 2-minute synopsis of what that looks like.
We'll give you 30 seconds.
Sure. So I'd say that the unique aspect of a service review is that it's not the board, all the board members are on the table. It is representatives of each of the participating jurisdictions that are then appointed by those bodies. They then come together with the support of a neutral third-party facilitator and engage in negotiations to address issues that are identified. So it could be, again, prompted by one jurisdiction expressing very clear concerns and those concerns being fairly readily identified. In other cases, it can require analysis and investigation to really try and understand the issues and seek resolution in some way that brings satisfaction to all the parties. Ultimately, that's the goal, I think, of any service review is to find a way to address the interests of all the parties around the table. Service withdrawal is, of course, a subsequent process if that agreement cannot be reached. But the process provides at a first stage for that service review to try and attempt to achieve that. And if not, then there can be further negotiations, mediation, or arbitration to settle a more entrenched dispute, perhaps.
Thank you for that. And so is there a different process for just releasing a participant?
Thank you through the chair. So yeah, it's 2 options, or to the point of option 2, the board has the opportunity or the option to amend the bylaw outside of the review process that could address the issues of concern for the town of Comox or another participant. And so we would still need to close out the service review process should that occur and should the board have the necessary approvals to amend that bylaw. But as it's been stated by the town of Comox alternate director tonight, if the interests are clear and the board is supportive of that, you could seek to undertake that legislative process, which is amending the bylaw and would not require a public approval process should the board agree to amend it with 2/3 consent of the participants.
Thank you.
And Director Minions. Oh, sorry, Colin. You're on.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I want to speak in support of the comments that were made by both Director Arbor and alternate Director Minions. Well, I would, of course, much prefer to see us embark on this housing authority jointly as a region. That's clearly not how this is going to go. It's already been decided, and that is it is up to the town of Comox if they want to participate in it. And as far as I'm concerned, that decision has been made. And for us to go through this formal process of sitting down, reviewing the service and going through the steps that are clearly laid out in the report, that's time that could be spent on initiating the service and getting to work on the housing authority. And I just see this as a real barrier to progress. And we would like to see work that we can report to the public and celebrate between now and when we go to the polls. So it just, to me, it's hard to make the case. And then additionally, there's costs involved in doing this, which would be coming out of this service that we could really be using those dollars towards something much more beneficial to the community. So I just basically want to express my support for option 2 as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And online, we have Chair Wilco Hamilton, who wants to chime in. Will?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I am also in support of the option 2 for the reasons stated by many of my colleagues, and I really appreciate the fact that alternate Director Minions is here today to speak for her community. And it sounds like all sides are agreed. This is just, for now, this is not a match. I just want to confirm and speak probably for Jake that at any point, any future council, and could even be this council later point, is entirely free to apply to rejoin that service. And maybe you could lay out what that looks like and how complex it would be for a future council of Comox to decide that they do wish to be a part of this.
Board Jake Martin.
Sure. Thank you through the chair. Yes. So participating members have the option to join a service if they are not a participant in it already. And the legislative process, again, requires an amendment to the service establishment bylaw. In the case of a municipality, they have the option to consent to that inclusion in the service. And so at the board's discretion in terms of how to achieve that participatory approval, it can be done fairly quickly and easily.
Well, that's great to know the door is always open. Okay, thanks, Jake.
Okay. And alternate Director Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to bring forward a comment that was pretty clearly articulated in the letter from Mayor Minions to the board. In particular, I think in consideration of my previous comments on the RGS minor amendment is around the way in which the CVRD engages in the work of the regional district. And I think it's clearly articulated here that the town of Comox felt like they were not adequately consulted throughout the process. And whatever you think about the mechanism for us to achieve our stated goal in the CVRD strategic plan, number one is affordable housing. I've heard from alternate Director Minions that the town wishes to continue to support that just within their own mechanism. So there's probably some debates to be had there, but I would like to hear from staff. And I know that there have been other issues around referrals to local governments, participating members of each service around changes, what we can say around the concerns raised around the process. I do want to acknowledge that they brought those concerns forward. I know we've been focusing on what's in front of us in terms of the recommendations for removal or service review, but I think it's important. I think I'm counting here 4 paragraphs in the letter that speak to process. And I think I've heard some directors from the town of Comox also speak to that. So I'd like to hear from staff around any process changes within the CVRD around consultation with member municipalities.
Thanks, Director, for the question. I think as the topic of the affordable housing service or the housing service evolved, and as the board undertook its strategic planning sessions and reports were developed, whether it was the direct action report or other background materials were presented, there's always opportunity to engage further, to do more. I think that's what you're pointing to in the letter here is an interest to be more engaging and to have more consultation touch points, if you will. So I think there's always opportunity to do more in that regard. That being said, there's a balance between taking these background materials and advancing projects and striking that right balance. And so, yeah, it's a it's a decision-making process that evolves and is iterative. Certainly from these processes, we are always seeking to learn, what can be done better in what ways. But I think I would just suggest that is the evolution of these decisions as we move along. And it does date back to strategic planning from at least from 2 years ago, if not more. So.
Yeah, thanks for that. And just to add, I agree fully. I mean, as an alternate director, I've actually felt quite engaged in the process. There is an elected officials forum on the topic. There's a strategic planning session. And so, yeah, I think to your point, there's been multiple opportunities for participation and to get buy-in from the town of Comox around why this mechanism in addressing our housing issues is the mechanism that will work for the Comox Valley. So, and thank you for acknowledging that there's an opportunity to do better in terms of process. So I'm supportive of the recommendation that others have also spoken to. Thanks.
Yes, important to note that it wasn't a unanimous decision. It was a 7-3 decision that we did do a vote to send it out to the municipalities for comment, and it was defeated 7-3. Director Arber.
Well, I think we're belaboring a point, but I appreciate as a new, being at this table, there's a lot of air that could be cleared. And if we headed into a negotiation and a service review, I think that this particular topic would come up because back 2.5 years ago, at our strategic planning session, this was the top topic. And the presentation around 450 and 451, the first formal presentation by staff at this table was in July. And I think Director Brown made a comment that she sees it as her responsibility to report back to her council on these things. And if the two members from Comox fail to recognize the significance of what we were working on and not give a heads up to their council, that's on them, not on our staff. So, and I know that what Director Grieve, by December, there was a presentation to town of Comox. So there's a long continuum of engagement. And if I was going to take issue with the letter, alternate Director Jolliker is probably right. That would be probably my one point of contention. Thanks.
And Director Brown.
At the risk of moving us along, I'd like to move recommendation 2.
We are on receipt still, and we have other speakers. Did you want to speak? No? Okay. So Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to reluctantly support the recommendation when it comes forward. I am concerned about the comments in the staff report about potential unintended consequences and the potential undermining of the service before it even gets started. But the writing does seem to be on the wall. There's no secret that this was a divided vote at the town of Comox, and that it was a divided vote between the two representatives from the town of Comox. But I would say that the issue here is based on politics and ideology, as opposed to any issues related to process. But we don't need to belabor that. I just wanted to put those comments on record. Thank you.
So I see no more lights. I think this has all been very helpful and clears the air a lot. Obviously, we're going to be moving ahead, and in the most expedited form. I think this is obviously the best outcome. So we're going to vote. One more comment.
Thank you. So in the staff report under option 2, we do have the italicized wording that staff thought could be a resolution for the board to consider if option 2 is of interest. If the board approves this today, then I will be engaging. So if the board approves this today, to amend the service establishment bylaw, we do need to achieve 2/3 consent from the participants, and that would be the councils and the EA directors. So this motion, if the board supports it, would instruct me to engage with the CAOs and the EA directors to determine whether or not that 2/3 consent is likely. And I do know that there is some interest in understanding some of the questions that would be answered through, asked and answered through a service review. And so, so I'm just giving you fair warning. I think that if that consent is not likely, we will come back to the board and the board will have to give further consideration to the service review proceeding. So I just want to put that out there that that consent is still important to achieve in option 2.
That still leaves us on receipt. So I'm going to call the question on receipt. Anybody opposed? And move option 2. Direct the administrative officer to explore the issues raised by the town of Comox in respect of their participation in Service 450 in a cursory fashion with the municipal chief administrative officer and the electoral area directors in conjunction with expedited service withdrawal from the town of Comox. And seconded? Somebody seconded? Okay, so it's on the table. I think, you know, families have their disagreements and we're just another family. Doesn't mean we don't love each other. Okay, so on that motion, I'm going to call for a show of hands. All in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. What be the will of the board? Do you guys want to do a working lunch or just plow through a little bit further? Working dinner, go to 6? Okay. So I'll just ignore the grumbling sounds of the tummies around the table and we're going to plow forward. Okay, so we don't need recommendation number 2. We're right into number 7, Electoral Area Service Committee minutes for receipt. Any discussion? All in favor? That carries. Comox Valley Recreation Commission, February 25th minutes for receipt. Sorry, the sewage? Sewage before rec. Well, that makes sense. Okay. So Electoral Area Comox Valley Sewage Commission, February 25th. And seconded. Any discussion? Any opposed? Carried. And now the Rec Commission, 25th. Any discussion? Any opposed? Carries. Regional Parks and Trails, 25th. Any opposed? Carried. And Electoral Area Service Committee, March 10th. Oh, the March 4th, so we had 2 of them, that's right, we had the secondary one, sorry. Any opposed? Carried. Now, Electoral Area Service Committee, March 10th for receipt. Move right to the recommendation, okay? So recommendation number 1. Comments, questions, Director Arbor?
Yeah, I thought I would test the waters on this one to see if my fellow directors want to up it up a bit with a strong recommendation on this one rather than a passive pass on to the ALC. I see no taker, so no.
I have to say that I have considered it some kind of a comment because if you, I know that the rest of the board isn't really live to this, but if you actually read the comments by the ministry, not the LC, but the ministry, it referred to the fact that there wasn't the right balance of actual farm use to non-farm use. So I would think that if anything, I would encourage the proponent to at least approach the ministry and find out what the mix is. But I don't think that's really our job. So I think we can just send it to the ALC. I think they can work from there. So I won't second it, not at this point. I think there's a way forward for them. So on one, all in favor? All opposed? It carries. Recommendation two, a TUP for Mackenzie. So on the TUP, any discussion? Seeing none. Any opposed? That carries. Recommendation three. Moved and seconded. This is on a placement of fill for non-farm use on a farm. Director.
Yeah, thanks. I'll definitely vote against this one. I cannot believe that in the same meeting, we don't support a working farm. And at the same time, someone who has barely a farming operation brings fill from elsewhere without permissions or anything is going to get kind of an easy pass. That I just don't understand how we make those two decisions in the same meeting. Thanks.
Well, I think again that the property owner is working towards more agricultural production on the farm. So, okay, so on recommendation three, all in favor? Any opposed? Carries. You're opposed. Dr. Roberts opposed. Recommendation four. Move in second on recommendation. Any more discussion? Any opposed? Carries. Recommendation five. Moved and seconded on five. Any opposed to five? Also carries. Bylaws and New Year's resolutions. First, second, third reading for bylaw number 863. Any discussion on it? On first and second, any opposed? That carries. Third, moved and seconded. Any discussion on third? Seeing none. Any opposed? Carries. Now, bylaw 864 for first and second. First and second is first and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any opposed to that? Carries. So on third, any discussion? Anybody opposed? That also carries. Now, the last on the list here is the recommendation for bylaw 858. Being adopted like an orphan. An orphan wastewater plant. We've seen a few of those. Okay, so it's moved and seconded for adoption. Any opposition to adoption? Seeing none, that also carries. We will now adjourn to in camera. Thank you, all you people out there in Cyberland.